This video is brought to you by Incogni. The closer we get to the next general election, the more perilous things seem to get for the Prime Minister. Not only is he struggling to improve his party's polling against Labour, but he's also having to dedicate an increasing amount of time fighting his own backbenchers, which in turn makes the fight against Labour even harder. There's now a growing feeling amongst especially more right-wing backbenchers that this dynamic is unsustainable, and that even though installing a fourth Prime Minister between elections would be unprecedented, it could actually improve Tory polling, albeit not enough to actually win the election. So in this video, we're going to have a look at the plot to ditch Sunak, how it could work, and ultimately whether it will be successful. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. It's worth starting by explaining exactly what the plot to ditch Sunak is and how this differs from previous attempts to undermine his authority. Now, it's true that there have been momentary flashes of rebellion throughout Sunak's tenure. This was, though, somewhat expected given the circumstances in which he took on the top job. Sunak was not elected by the grassroots members of his party, with them instead backing his opponent Liz Truss in the leadership election, a woman who not only sits on the backbenches, but still has considerable influence from them. The Liz Truss libertarian faction of the party often tried to push Sunak further to the right, most notably on immigration policy. For months, as the Rwanda scheme has been making its way through Parliament, this group has threatened to undermine it, kill the bill, and, subsequently, end Sunak's premiership. They've not yet succeeded on this, largely because there's been little coordination between the rebels. It's been reported this week, though, that this rebel alliance may now have a name, a number of backers, and an overarching plan to unseat the Prime Minister. The group is known as the Conservative Britain Alliance, or CBA, and they funded the recent MRP poll produced by YouGov. It cost around £40,000 and demonstrated that Labour are on course for a huge 120-seat majority at the next election, with the Tories predicted to win only 169 seats, only 4 more than John Major won against Tony Blair in the 1997 Labour landslide. The group used this poll to try and undermine Sunak and his government. Lord Frost, who is linked to the CBA, wrote an op-ed in The Telegraph arguing that the government needs to go further right in order to bring back those 2019 voters who left us. If not, he argues, there will soon only be smoking rubble left. Now, Frost did stop short of publicly calling for Sunak to go, but the undertone was clear. This was a warning to the Prime Minister. However, other members of the group have been far more explicit. Will Dry, a former advisor to Number 10, claimed that the Tories are heading for the most almighty of defeats if Sunak isn't replaced. He's one of around 10 former advisors that are supposedly working for the CBA, and is the only one to have gone on record. While he might not be the most prominent figure, his attitude likely reflects the attitudes of some backbenchers, most notably Simon Clarke, who recently also called on Sunak to be ousted from Number 10, with him claiming that Sunak's uninspiring leadership is the main obstacle to our recovery. It's not clear, though, whether Clarke is part of the CBA or whether his goal of ousting Sunak from Number 10 simply aligns with their goals. For the CBA to be successful, it's important that the grouping contains some MPs. They're the ones that will be able to frustrate the government on policy and, ultimately, trigger a no-confidence vote in Sunak's leadership. Outside of the speculation about Clarke, there's been little actually confirmed about the involvement of MPs. It's been reported that there are around 10 MPs that are part of the group, and some reports suggest that the group is MP-led, although this is not confirmed. It was reported only this week that Kemi Badenoch, someone who's tipped to be a future leader of the Conservative Party, is a member of a WhatsApp group called Evil Plotters, despite her public calls for disloyal MPs to stop messing around. While it's unclear whether she's part of the CBA, it does indicate that there is support on the backbenches for some way for the rebels to plan their rebellion. And to be fair, this is understandable. The 5 families, 5 separate groups of right-wing Tory backbenchers, wanted to try and kill the Rwanda bill at both the second and third readings, and were unable to do so as they couldn't get any momentum. So, whether it's the CBA or some other kind of WhatsApp group, it's clear that there's a growing appetite for Tories to rebel against Sunak. But how will they do this? Well, the next few weeks seem like they're going to be critical for the rebels. Sunak is facing a double by-election on the 15th of February. Peter Bone's old constituency of Wellingborough and Chris Skidmore's old constituency of Kingswood. Bone had a majority of 18,540 and Skidmore had a majority of 11,220. Neither are by any means small and normally could be pretty tricky for an opposition party to overturn. Given that Labour and the Lib Dems overturned larger majorities than these last year, it's quite possible that Sunak is about to face the embarrassment of a defeat in both by-elections. This would give the rebels significant momentum. They would only need to keep this momentum up for a couple of months, before the local elections on the 2nd of May. Again, were Sunak to lose a significant number of colleagues, the rebels could use this to their advantage, and point out that this is a sign of things to come. The rebels only need to convince 54 of their colleagues in total that they no longer have confidence in Sunak as leader in order to trigger a leadership election. Once a leadership election is called, Sunak's authority will plummet, even if he survives it. It's worth remembering that both May and Johnson actually technically won their no-confidence votes, but were still forced out of office soon after. So, could this rebellion actually work? Well, as we mentioned earlier, there's certainly an appetite amongst some backbenchers to get rid of Sunak. Labour leads the Tories by more than 20 points in the polls, and voters trust them more on the economy, the NHS, and asylum and immigration, the three most important policy areas right now. All of this spooks Tory MPs who are worried about losing their seat in the general election. However, it's feared that changing out leaders now could just make the situation even worse, and consign the Tories to the opposition benches for even longer. MPs that were loyal to previously ousted leaders, such as Priti Patel, actually spoke out against Simon Clarke when he suggested that Sunak should resign. As of right now then, it looks unlikely that the rebellion is strong enough to force Sunak out of office. However, with the funding that Conservative Britain Alliance has, the upcoming by-elections and local elections, and the threat of a huge defeat in the general election, it's quite possible that we could see a new Tory leader in the next few months.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't honestly...
Now, while you've been watching this video, you might not realise that shady forces are working in the background to collect personal data from various sites and bundle it all together ready to sell on to a third party. Now, these data brokers can sell this bundle of information about you to anyone from a company to an online criminal. Now, while you might assume that you're safe online, perhaps you change your password regularly, or perhaps you're a hawk and always uncheck that little box that signs you up to annoying newsletters. Unfortunately, this doesn't completely save you. Companies that hold your data can still fall victim to a data breach, meaning that these data brokers can still compile information about you to sell on to others. Now, this is where our sponsor Incogni comes in. They reach out to these data brokers on your behalf, request that your data is removed, and deal with any problems that might arrive. In fact, they're tenacious and will put in multiple data removal requests even after your data's been removed to make sure that it doesn't go back on the market. So create an account with our link in the description, grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf, and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, by using our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Thanks for checking it out, and thanks for Incogni for sponsoring this video.